In this video we're going to discuss how to actually install Openshift. In previous videos I've shown where I have built several boxes so we can build a full cluster and set up the SSH keys and set up DNS. You're going to need all of those for this to work. You can install on a single node, you'll still need DNS to work. So Ansible is the tool used to install that. This is my Ansible host, and it will SSH to all the boxes and do all the installation work. This is my Ansible host file, and you'll see that I've got just a few things set. Type origin. Origin is the freeware version of Openshift. You can see where I've set my domain name. This is one of the bugs I found in the 3.11 install, is the service catalog doesn't install properly. So I've added this just to disable it. You don't really need it. And then we have the configuration of my nodes down here. So you can see that I have a single master, a single infra, and 3 app nodes. Now in the corporation I work for, I have 3 masters, but I have an F5 load balancer in front of it. I have 3 infra with a F5 load balancer in front of it. I haven't set up any type of load balancer at the house, so I run single master and single infra. The infra ends up being the router, and it's going to route your traffic to any of these 3. So if you do an NS lookup of 1.pierce.home, if I could learn to spell, infra 1.pierce.home, you'll see that it is 145, and if I do a wildcard, meaning ns anything dot, I'm sent to this same address. The gist of this is when I type in an address in my web browser called pierce.home, it's going to go to my infra box. My infra box ends up being my router. So that's the basic setup. Each of these boxes can get out to the internet. Now here's where the other bug I ran into. Red Hat uses something called Yum, and it has something called a repo. A repo is a repository of software out in the world, and there's different ways to set it up, but in general, since I can get out on the internet, I had to add a origin repo. If you look, the most recent file in here is origin.repo. So I had to set that up. Now you'll notice this is set on my Ansible host. I actually did not need this in my Ansible host. What I have to do is actually copy this config file to each of my servers. That way they can get to it. So I'm going to do that now. So scp -rp to Alright, so that's the master. Yes, there are faster ways to do this. Okay, so now if we look at the Origin, Openshift Origins website, that's okd.io, I'm going to go to the documentation, select version, select the latest, which is the 3.1, and there is all sorts of information here. I'm going to open up the installing clusters. configuring your inventory file and example inventory files. If you didn't want to go try to copy mine, they have samples out here for the different things that you may want to do. Mine's a pretty simple one that actually stole off of here. I believe this is the source one I used. Single master, single etc, and multiple inventory nodes. Part of preparing the hosts, including adding the Ansible software itself, you go under the documentation, preparing the hosts, and installing base packages. Now this is where it can get a little confusing, but essentially here they are talking about what you need to do to your Ansible host. The other boxes, you just need to get the bare OS on there, get them to where they can download repos. So you want to configure their resolve.conf to be able to get out in their routing, and just make sure they're a basic OS that can do yum updates. As I mentioned, I had to add one of the yum repos, so you really don't have to do all this work on all your boxes. You just need your Ansible box to go ahead and install the software they have here, update, reboot. You have to be careful when it's talking about what method you're using. If you're using containerized installer, well, that's a deprecated method anymore, so disregard that. You need to come down here if you're using the RPM based installer. So again, you do have to install these packages in this list, ignore the rest of the stuff, and do these commands. So here we're installing a repo, disabling it, using it. Here is where you're actually pulling down the Ansible playbooks. So you cd into, I guess, your home directory that was at, git clone the Openshift Ansible, right? That's going to download it to your Ansible box. Then you can cd into what it downloads, set your release, and then you can skip over to the next section, which is actually installing the hosts. So now we're going to go down to installing Openshift, and we're going to be running an RPM installation. The other version, I understand, is not going to be available anymore, and I want to point out these two commands. There's a run Ansible that is the prerequisites.yaml, and then there is a deploy. So what I'm going to do is, on my Ansible host, I'm going to go to where my my Ansible playbooks were downloaded, which is root, how to download this is also in this document, and you can see there's a directory called playbooks. And you see that they've listed playbooks here, so I'm cd playbooks, and you can see there's a whole stack of playbooks, and I'm interested in the prerequisites.yaml right now. I've already ran this a few times, so I'm going to rm this retry, and then I'm going to run their command. So there we go. So the I was passed for inventory, it wasn't passed to the YAML file. Sorry about that. And as you can see, basically it starts SSHing to those boxes and doing things. We are not worried about the warnings. We're wanting to see mostly green, and this generally runs for about an hour. When you run into errors, you will Control-C, jump out, and you will have to correct them. Typical things I've had to correct is, even though I set up my SSH keys, it still wants me to accept the SSH key, even though I've accepted it when I've done it in my command line. So it's a little bug. I'll have to figure out why the script is saving the known hosts somewhere else. The other two things I just mentioned, where I had to put the repo in and I had to disable the service catalog, those are other things where I've found in the installation process where it would just error out and then I had to go fix it and start over. So we have ran the prerequisite playbook at this point, and as you can see, it made many changes to my servers that I'm building in my cluster, but not my local host, which is my Ansible host. So now I'm ready to run the deploy cluster.yaml. So one thing you might notice, sorry, I figured this may be confusing. When I ran the prerequisites, I was actually in the playbooks directory. I am currently running from one directory backwards, meaning in just root OpenShift Ansible. This is obviously a different run than my previous recording, but you know, it's been a week, so now we're going to run the DEP. Alright, and just like the prerequisites run, it takes it a few minutes and then it starts making changes, and this runs about an hour. Guys, so the installer took a little time. Looks like it says it took about 30 minutes, and as you can see, it shows that it installed everything correctly. So we're going to go to a web browser, and I have a link here, but you go to master.pierce.home:8443. So that's trying to go to my master node, and this is kind of normal, so you do advanced, proceed, and here we have our login. So here I'm on the Ansible SSH master, and now we do OC get pods, and it shows a few things running. I'm going to do -O wide, and as you can see, that actually spreads out a little bit, and so you can see it's got a few pods running that are the basics of what's running. It's got one running on the infra, one on the master, another one on the infra, OC get nodes. Alright, so I believe I have a working system because it says everything is ready. I'll point out that right now I won't be able to log in because I have not set up any logins for the system. So I've got another video for that. Thank you.